Let's see.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Everybody's rolling in now.
Yes. All right.
Well, this is the perfect time of year to talk WISP since it's P10 renewal time and everybody's kind of rechecking themselves on their cybersecurity and making sure they have their ducks in a row as they prepare for the first of a brand new year. And I still can't believe that we're talking about 2025
I
right now.
know. This year just flew by. It's crazy. I
I feel
think,
like we just did some of this content. It's refreshed for 2024, but I feel like we just did this. And I went back and looked at notes and found it was from October of last year, which does feel like yesterday.
I think as you get older, time just goes by faster. I'm starting to really believe that. All right, let's get started. It's 3 after. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. Today, we're going to dive into WISP compliance. Well, I know it's probably not exactly like a thrill ride, but it's the best way to keep us, your clients, and your firm safe in the digital world. I'm Mandy Sullivan. I'm an executive account manager here at Visory, and I also have my teammate Sam Schumacher on here with us. He is the director of product and solutioning here with me at Visory. Thank you, Sam, for joining me as
Glad to
always.
be here as always.
Mhm. Let's take a look at the agenda. First, we're going to understand the WISP and what all needs to be covered in the WISP. Then we're going to talk about strengthening your team for cybersecurity compliance. And then lastly, we're going to get into AI and threat hunting in financial services.
And what I love about this agenda, Mandy, is it covers all three of our pillars that we're going to be talking about. And that's going to be our people, process, and tools. You can also think about it as people, policy, and tools. But to kick us off, we do have one quick poll. It's the only one of the entire day. Just hoping to get a sense for our guests, where they are in terms of their challenges.
Yes, and I am trying to, there we go. I'm going to launch the poll right now.
You got it. Awesome. So we'll let that hang out there for a couple of seconds. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the WISP, some of the elements of the WISPs, how you get started with it. We're going to share our template for it. It's a pretty decent template. We really just took what the IRS has provided as a template and made some and enhancements to it to make it a little bit more user friendly. And we'll be talking about some other things that you can do to build a culture of security, which is really where we think your biggest threat is with your people. We know that from the data, but we think that's really your biggest opportunity for strengthening your approach. So we'll be talking about all that good stuff. Go ahead and share the results, Mandy.
I'm so sorry. I did not share the results. Oh wait, I can. Huh?
All right, so there you
Cool.
go. That's where we're at. It looks like understanding the WISP, and then we got some concerns around data security, some of the data loss prevention stuff. Keeping up with regulatory changes. Yep, I expected that one. And breach plans, and then dealing with data in multiple systems. So good. I think we'll touch on a lot of that today. Let's go ahead and move to uh, the next one here.
All right. Why is WISP compliance mandatory for financial professionals? I have 5 key points that I want to discuss here. It's about staying ahead of the game. It's about protecting your good stuff, battling cyber threats, building client trust, and dodging consequences. Let's let's kick it off with a quick look at regulations. In our world, rules are the name of the game, and WISP compliance keeps us in check with these big organizations like the FTC and the IRS. When we're compliant, it's like we're shouting, hey, we've got this covered. to both the regulators as well as our clients. Now, let's talk about where it gets real, protecting the good stuff. Every day you handle sensitive data like social security numbers, bank details, financial histories. This stuff is like gold when it gets into the wrong hands. A WISP helps us create a shield around this information, giving us and our clients confidence that their data is being locked up tight. Think of your WISP as your secret weapon against cyber threats. Financial data is a hot target, and our WISP is the strategy to keep us one step ahead of the hackers. Let's face it, clients come to you because they trust you. They trust that you're handling their data like it's your own. And when they know you have a WISP and that you're compliant with that WISP, they see it as you are serious about your security. This builds stronger relationships with you because they know you've got their back. And then the not so fun part, the potential legal and financial hits if you're not compliant with the WISP and something goes wrong is more than just a headache. It's like lawsuits, fines, and it can be a real PR nightmare. So the bottom line, WISP compliance is more than just a requirement. It's basically your toolkit for staying safe, savvy, and ahead of the curve. It's all about protecting what matters to you guys, your firm, your clients, and your reputation. Yeah.
So that's awesome, and it's so relevant today. And I think if we had to break it down into its simplest form, right? The WISP is just a written document that identifies how your practices are around collecting, transmitting, storing, and protecting data. But it's also going to cover destroying data. So making sure we're not holding on to everything forever just because we have the cloud storage to do so. That opens up a whole new threat vector. And so that's another area to consider.
Yeah.
But what are those, I guess, what are those core areas of a WISP? What are the things that are absolute requirements according to the FTC? And this is where it starts to get really overwhelming. So what I like to coach people on is when you think about your written information security plan, the first thing you want to do is evaluate your risks. So where's your data? Who has access to it? How often are you going through and doing some cleanup of the sharing that's happening? And all of that. So we'll start here on this slide with data protection. And so when we're talking about data protection, we're talking about a layer of security that you put in place through physical measures. Physical, and they could be technology, physical measures. And we talk about things like disk encryption, password protecting your different tools. Multi-factor authentication, I think, is on here as its own thing. It is, but that's another layer of data protection. And so you could also think of data protection from the days of old being a key to the filing cabinet. So the keys that we use for our digital filing cabinets now are going to be things like complex passwords and multi-factor authentication. And I see a Q&A for the slides. We'll definitely share the deck out in our follow-up. You'll get a copy of all of these. So don't worry about taking screenshots and a bunch of notes from that. We'll share this out. Next time we'll try to make it a handout so you can just grab it live during the webinar. So yeah, data protection, it's going to encompass a few of the things that we see on the screen, things like encryption, multi-factor authentication. And MFA is a huge one. Mandy, I know that one that is near and dear to your heart.
Yes, absolutely. Turn it on. That's what I can say. It is the most simplest yet most powerful tool we have in our security toolkit. If you've ever logged into an account and then had to enter the text message afterwards or go to your app, congratulations, you've already used it. But just beyond being another step, it's like a superhero layer of protection for our accounts. Believe me, I know it's a real pain sometimes, but hackers have all sorts of ways to guess or steal our passwords, whether it's through phishing, guessing, or going back to old data that they've breached. MFA adds that extra layer, requiring at least 2 different ways to prove that you're really you. Typically, this means something like something you know, your password, something you have, your text code or the authenticator app, or something that you are, like a fingerprint or a face scan. So even if a hacker does by chance get your password, they're going to hit a dead end whenever it comes to that second layer of defense.
And we're starting to see a lot more trends as it relates to this layer of protection, MFA, that multi-factor authentication, because because organizations have so many usernames and passwords to manage. We're starting to see a trend in the direction of identity governance. And so what we mean by that is organizations, IT companies, or outsourced IT, starting to use things like Microsoft Azure or Okta, tools like that that provide a more seamless user experience. So we're not memorizing all those passwords or, heaven forbid, putting them in an Excel spreadsheet and sharing them about. So really robust password management in a way that sort of passes through an identity instead of the password itself. So we're starting to see a lot of trends moving in that direction. I wouldn't be surprised at all. In fact, I've got it on my 2025 predictions for trends that we're going to see a lot more out there in terms of blogs and webinars from people that are in the industry that are talking about identity governance and ways to make these multi-cloud environments more secure. Because when we think about clouds, we're all in multiple clouds. We have our Microsoft, maybe we have our Google, maybe we have our Dropbox or our Box or QuickBooks Online, or maybe we've got some of our tax software like UltraTax that's in another cloud. So we're in these multi-cloud environments, and so it's definitely critical to have multi-factor authentication. It's one of the bare minimum requirements in our minds, but I think we'll start to see trends for identity governance moving forward. Which actually, I guess, is where we come into access controls. So limiting access to the people that should have it and limiting just how much access they have within that environment. So when we talk about access controls, we're talking about not only who can get to the data shares and the applications, but how many layers within those data shares and applications they can get to. You think about QuickBooks Online, I think that's a perfect example. Really, any ERP, you've got different roles for different people. So someone that needs access to accounts payable may not need access to accounts receivable or payroll. So when we think about access controls in those ways, we try to apply that to our data shares. So our SharePoint directories or our Google Drive, our OneDrive, whatever we're using for that shared repository, even an on-prem file server, really locking down through permissions based on who the user is and what they need, what the minimum amount of information access they need to do their jobs effectively.
All right, let's talk about the incident response plan. And an incident response plan is essentially just a set of pre-planned steps that tell us exactly what to do when a security incident occurs. It's like having a break glass and in case of an emergency guide. Whether it's a data breach, ransomware, unauthorized access, the incident response plan spells out the who, what, and how we're going to manage the incident. This will keep you from scrambling around on what to do next. So why is it important? Imagine being caught in a fire without an escape. It turns into total chaos. By having the plan, you're able to ensure that you stay calm, efficient, and proactive when the incident hits. Let's break down the 5 stages of having an incident response plan. Preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, recovery. And then actually there's 6. And then lessons learned. So let's start with preparation. This is all about training and being ready. Identify who the key players are on your incident response team, practice simulations with them, and make sure that they know their tools and their roles before anything ever happens. Detection and analysis. Here's where you detect and analyze any suspicious activity in your environment. Your goal here is to spot the incidents early and figure out what's going on. Early detection can really be crucial because it can limit the amount of damage. And then you're going to want to contain it. Now, once you know there's an issue, you need to contain it fast. This might mean isolating the affected system or limiting network access. Containment is all about preventing the incident from spreading across the rest of your systems. Then you're going to want to get to the eradication. After containment, it's time to find where the root cause is. Once you do this, you're going to remove the malware, close any of the security gaps, and ensure there's no trace of the threat remains. Then we're going to be on the road to recovery. Now that you're on the back to the path of normal, you've restored the effective systems, you remove the malware, you want to monitor it closely, and then confirm that everything is secure and safe before you go back online. Then you're going to want to have a team huddle and review what happened to see where you can review where you can improve. This is one of the most important steps because it's going to help you strengthen your defenses and so it doesn't happen again. The last step we're going to cover a little more in depth here shortly, and it's data breach reporting, but we'll get into that one here in a couple of seconds. All right.
Yes, we definitely have information on breach reporting, and we'll get into that. So vendor management, we'll breeze through this one. You deal with a ton of third-party apps. Anything in accounting is highly collaborative, but we also have a lot of integrations because no one tool can do it all. So we've got things for expense management and timekeeping and benefits management. So we have all these third parties that have access to personal information for us or our clients. And so it's perfectly acceptable and even becoming much more common these days to have vendor assessments done and just interviewing our vendors and saying, hey, like to know where our data lives that you hold for us and who has access to it, and do we do background checks, and are there any third-party contractors that have access to our information? And if so, what kind of security measures do you put in place? So it's okay to have those conversations. And I think, Mandy, don't we have like a templated vendor assessment?
And I can attach that tomorrow whenever I send out the email with the reporting to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be great.
Yep.
So vendor management, it's becoming much more commonplace, especially as we start to use tools that have AI embedded in them. So there's plenty of accounting tools these days that are starting to leverage AI and these large language models to make their tools even more powerful. It's not only acceptable, but I think warranted to ask them who owns that data, and how are they training their models, and are they training it on your data that you have on your clients? Because that's the red flag, right? How safe is it for an AI tool to be trained on your clients' personally identifiable or sensitive information?
All right, let's talk about security awareness training, my favorite topic. This is one of the best defenses we have in keeping our data and our systems safe. Because believe it or not, the human factor is often the biggest vulnerability in your firm. With security awareness training, you can turn that biggest potential weakness into your biggest potential strength. The strongest cybersecurity tools can't help if someone accidentally clicks on a phishing link or unknowingly gives away their sensitive information. By equipping your team with the tools and knowledge that they need to know through security awareness training, you are significantly reducing the risk across the board for your team. All
And that
right.
brings us to encryption. And so encryption is something that can be done at the disk level. So when we think about encryption, we can talk about it in terms of a security system for your home. Without the key and the password, they're not going to be able to get past the security and get into your home. And so that's the same thing with disk encryption. And so what that means is that if your laptop were to be stolen, someone removed the disk and plugged it into a different device, if that disk is encrypted, only the machine that has the chip that wrote that and is holding that key can actually access that disk information. So when we talk about hardware management and making sure that our devices are up to date and they're enterprise grade, so we've got those pro operating systems on them, and we've got that TPM chip installed, which is something that I want to say about 3 years ago became pretty standard in the Windows devices that we saw. That TPM chip is what enables that disk encryption. And so it's actually pretty easy to see if you have disk encryption turned on. It's under your settings of your computer. And I think if you just search encryption, yeah, there's a data encryption and there's a device encryption settings that you can access there. Be happy to walk anybody through it if you had questions. In fact, I've got Mandy, remind me, I've actually got an instructional thing we can send out that shows how to look for disk encryption. So
Well,
I'm
my
happy to.
email to everyone's getting longer and longer tomorrow.
I know. So happy to share that, and you can take a look for it. You want to make sure if your device supports encryption, you've got encryption turned on. So that's another one of those really economically feasible things that you can do and should be doing. Um, and then the systems monitoring and testing. This can be relatively simple or it can be incredibly robust. And I think what I want to do is just sort of level set about the WISP and its level of detail. So the FTC's made it really clear in their documentation that the WISP needs to document reasonable controls for reasonable risks. So the WISP, when we're looking at it, when we're writing it, we're looking at your actual threat vectors. So when you're considering it, you're considering your actual risks. And that's why this starts with a risk analysis. And, a small firm may have smaller risks than a large firm, or it could be upside down from that. It really depends on the firm. But you may not have a 25-page WISP at the end of this. You may have a 4-page WISP that says, hey, I've turned on multi-factor, I've got my encryption, I've got some access controls in place that we're looking at on a yearly basis to make sure they're good. We've turned on cybersecurity awareness training, and we go through that quarterly, and we've got regular simulations that are happening through a platform, and we've written our incident response plan. So that may be the extent of your WISP. If you're a great big firm and you've got 20 or 30 employees, then it might be a little bit bigger than that. You might have some other areas that you're addressing. But just keep in mind that this doesn't have to be, this massive exercise. This can be relatively simple if your firm's needs and risks are relatively simple. So don't get too overwhelmed by all the areas of inspection here.
Absolutely. Let's talk about backup and recovery. In our world these days, data is everything. It's our projects, our work, our client information, and it's all digital and it's all extremely vulnerable. Backup and recovery are kind of like our security blankets, making sure we don't lose anything in the case an incident happens. But one key point to backup and recovery is testing it. Just like you test your fire alarm every time you set the clocks back or forward, you're going to want to make sure that you test your backups and recovery. So in the event that an incident does ever happen, that you know that your backups are there and ready to go for you. Sam, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Sorry about this, but I want you to tell us about your scenario that you had where the controller walked out and they thought
Oh,
they had backups in place and
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you set the foundation for it. So yeah, and unfortunately it's all too common event. So backups are critical, and it's not just the fact that we have backups or we think we have backups. We want to be able to test the recovery from those backups. In the case that you were sharing, a controller was disgruntled, walked out, deleted everything on the server. Business owner thought, no problem. We've got backups. We'll just recover. Unfortunately, the earliest or the latest, I guess it would be the latest recoverable backup was something like 18 months old, and they were 2 weeks away from an audit. So it took them a long time to recover from that, and so that was pretty brutal. I'll share a more recent story. A customer of another MSP had a backup agent turned on for their laptops. The MSP was not validating that the backups were consistently performing, and they weren't on any sort of regular cadence testing the recovery from those backups. A couple of users had catastrophic events with their laptops. There were no backups to recover from. So, it just underscores the necessity of testing recovery from the backup. And so when you're backing up something like Office 365, testing the recoverability of those files is as simple as just restoring a file. Did the file restore? Was the data intact? Yes, great. My backups are running, and I can sleep easy. With something like a server or a workstation, testing the recovery of that can be a little trickier, but certainly doable.
Absolutely. The last requirement on the WISP is a breach notification. Hopefully none of us ever have to deal with this, but when your client's data is at risk, they have the right to know, and they deserve to know as soon as possible. So providing them a timely, honest, and thorough notification allows those affected to take steps to protect themselves, like updating their passwords, watching their accounts, or even freezing credit if it's necessary. It's all about empowering that client to protect themselves after a known incident has occurred. So what really goes into a good breach notification? You're going to want to make sure that they know what happened, what information was compromised, what you're doing about it, what they can do to protect themselves, and who they can contact for more information. Provide a clear, straightforward explanation of the breach, the type of incident that occurred, and when it was discovered. You're going to want to let them know that what was compromised. Transparency here is essential. If sensitive data was exposed, like names, addresses, social security number, or financial details, those affected need to know as soon as possible so they can take action to protect themselves. Then you're going to want to let them know what you're doing about it. This is where you detail the steps you're taking to contain the breach. You're investigating the root cause, you're improving your security. Showing the clients here that you're being proactive about the incident is going to help to rebuild the trust. And then you're going to want to let them know what they can do to protect themselves. Offer practical tips like changing their passwords or monitoring their credit, or you might even provide resources such as free credit monitoring to help them stay protected. And then you're going to want to give them clear contact information of who they can call should they need any more details. Set up a dedicated hotline, an email, or a web page. When it comes to the breach notification, timing is critical. Most regulations require that these notifications go out as soon as possible so that the clients can protect themselves. Fast, transparent communication helps those prevent the incident from spreading even further. I think we've covered them all. That was a lot, but I think you guys have a clear understanding of each of the steps that are required in the WISP, and later we're going to give you a template that you can, look at to help fill out yours. But let's move on here and talk about cybersecurity compliance and training.
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit to the incident response plan and the breach notification. They do go hand in hand. And for our tax professionals, this is really, it's going to vary by state. You'll start with your IRS stakeholder liaison, and they will guide you to the next step. So, Mandy just walked through a really comprehensive plan. Just know that you're not alone in the event of an incident. You'll lean on your managed service provider. You'll lean on your IRS liaison, who will guide you to the FTC if it requires notification to the FTC, which will be required if more than 500 individuals had information that was exposed. And good news is the FTC is going to guide you to the next step from there. Do you need to contact the FBI and Secret Service? And then they're going to guide you to whether or not you need to talk to your state attorney general. So you'll start with the IRS liaison. They're going to guide you to the next party, guide you to the next party, guide you to the next party. So it's going to all be in your incident response plan. Varies by state. Again, if you're in California, the rules might be totally different than the rules if you're in Missouri. So best thing you can do is talk to your IRS stakeholder liaison if you have questions on what your state's requirements are going to be.
All right.
All right, so we've gone through a lot about the WISP, and I think that the challenges that we have when we consider our written information security plans, again, is the breadth and depth of the WISP. So how complicated does it need to be? Like I said before, the IRS's documentation on this is pretty clear. It should address that you have reasonable controls for reasonable risks. And the risks that a solopreneur is going to have are going to be different than the risks that say one of the big five are going to have. So different threat footprints, different different size footprints in general. So do you work out of your home office? Do you have 25 physical locations? So different scenarios require different tools. And when we talk about cybersecurity, we like to talk about it in terms of its three pillars. So really every one of our risks can be centralized into one of these areas. We have technology, we have policies. So our written information security plan, our incident response plan, we might have a work from home policy. We could have a policy is related to whether or not personal devices can access corporate and client data. So those are the kinds of policies and processes we're talking about. And then we have people. And so we want to build a culture of security. And building a culture of security means educating our teams. We talked about that as one of the FTC requirements anyway. It's also one of the IRS Security 6 requirements. So that cybersecurity awareness training and testing that Mandy was talking about. We want to make sure that that training is regular to make sure that the threat stay top of mind. There's some awesome platforms out there. I'll share that we use KnowBe4 as a platform that we deploy to customers. It's a platform that actually leverages AI, and I'll talk about that when we get to our AI slide. But your awareness training and testing, making sure that that's on a regular basis and that there's simulations that are happening is going to be super critical when it comes to developing that culture of security. And then we've got our processes, talked about the work from home, the policies around what devices can access corporate data. And what's great about that is that technology comes into play here when you decide what kinds of policies you want enforced. And so enforcement can happen from the technology layer. You can use technology to say, only devices that meet these criteria can access any of these applications or any of this data. And the person that can access it also has to meet some criteria, be a trusted identity, have multi-factor authentication, so all of that good stuff. And that can be managed at that technology layer. And some of the other technology, so that's around the access controls that we talked about when we talked about access controls for the WISP requirements. Within the WISP, there's also going to be questions about threat hunting. So we're going to talk about some threat hunting, but that's another technology layer. So how are we looking for and mitigating threats for ransomware? That's a good way to put that. And then also at the technology layer would be that disk encryption that I mentioned, backups. So your backup strategy for business continuity as it relates to being able to recover data in the event of a breach. And then the IRS also addresses a VPN, and there's been a lot of back and forth in the industry about whether or not a VPN should be used. I'll share that VPNs have come a long way from just being a VPN that was kind of clunky, kind of slow, kind of a pain to use, to much more modern cloud-based options that are considered secure access service edges. So SASE is what the acronym is, SASE. And so those solutions that have a VPN, have a web-based gateway, which serves as like a cloud firewall, really helps to secure that remote work. So if you've got a hybrid workforce, or maybe you travel a lot, you go to a ton of conferences, it provides you that additional security layer. So there's some good stuff that can be done with technology to support those processes and policies, and then also help keep your people safe, because people are your biggest threat. Hands down, in the data that we look at, people tend to be the source of over 90% of the breaches, be it through human error or malicious intent. And so that's where our technology and processes come in.
All right, let's talk about strengthening your team training for cybersecurity compliance. It's not really just about following the rules here. It's about building a culture where every team member is aware, alert, and engaged to keep all your clients' data secure, as well as the data of your firm. How can you handle compliance training so that it's engaging for everyone? Well, let's put together here. I put together some stuff here. So let's talk about it. You need to make sure that they understand the cybersecurity threats. You need to make sure that they understand your policies and procedures. You need to make sure that they have hands-on practice and simulation, that they know what to do whenever it comes to an incident and how to respond. And then you're going to want to make sure that you have regular refreshers, because the attacks are always evolving. So you're going to want to make sure that they're up to date. First, everyone's going to want to need to know whether it's phishing, malware, ransomware, or social engineering. Explain what each of these are. Make them relatable, make them memorable, so they know what to look for and how to avoid it. Then you're going to want to make sure your company has policy and procedures put into place. Compliance is all about following the steps, but ensuring that every team member understands your company's specific policies and procedures for when it comes to data handling, email passwords, email use, password management, device security, or wire transfers. Anytime you're transferring money is really going to help. And then, like Sam was talking about, you're going to want to make sure that you have a hands-on simulation platform like KnowBe4, where they can take the test. Then there's real world simulations that they can use, so they can practice what they've learned in a safe environment. And then you're going to want to make sure that they know what to do. Like if they're all of a sudden sitting at their computer and it starts blinking and something is going on, you need to make sure they know who to contact and what to do to kick off that incident response plan. And then regular refreshers. We recommend quarterly training with ongoing random phishing simulation. All right, Sam. Now we can, let's move on. Now that we just talked about what to do for your security awareness training, let's talk about a real world phishing attack. So about a year ago, I was invited out for one of our vendors for a security awareness training. And he was telling us about one of his clients and what happened to the small mortgage company. The accounts payable lady received an email from what appeared to be the CEO's email address, and the subject line on it read "Urgent wire transfer needed today." And it was written in a tone that created a sense of urgency, saying something like, "I need you to wire $50,000 to this account right away. I'm in a meeting, can't be disturbed. Just get this done as soon as possible and let me know when you did it." The email was designed to look authentic. It looked like it was coming from the CEO. So the employee kind of felt like, I better get this done immediately. So the employee didn't look further into it. They hadn't had any training. The employee sent the wire. And by the time the company realized that the request was fraudulent, the money was already in an overseas account, which led to significant financial loss for the company. It required a costly investigation. And in this instance, the CEO actually had to take out a second mortgage on his home to pay the client back, because that money was actually in an escrow account for their closing cost on their home. So they had to give that money back to the client. Should they have had some cybersecurity awareness training and policies and procedures put into place, this could have been prevented. They would have known to look at the email address more closely to make sure that the letters were all correct. Anytime there's a sense of an urgency in an email, you always need to look at it more closely, because phishing and hackers, they prey on human nature. So you see something that creates urgency, you want to do it quickly, especially when it's coming from the CEO. But this should definitely make you take a pause and look at that email a little bit harder to make sure that it's actually who it's from. And then there always should be a policy in place before your company wires any money out. Verbal confirmation over the phone, picking up the phone, calling that CEO on a known number and talking to them to get verbal confirmation before you send the wires. These are easy steps that you can put into place to protect your firm.
Yeah, we've also seen a trend recently, Mandy, where cybersecurity experts are starting to talk about having a password, if you will. So you think
Yeah.
about the home security systems, we all have to have that password. So if the security system gets a phone call that says, "Hey, everything's fine here. You don't need to send anybody. It's fine." They'll ask for that password to make sure that it's a legitimate cancellation of the call. And that's a password that's
Absolutely.
not written down anywhere. It's not in any digital systems, right? It's because then it can be compromised. So we're starting to see those cyber experts talk about having that within your team. So if Mandy says, "Hey Sam, go buy me $1,000 in gift cards," and that's uncharacteristic, I'll pick up the phone, call Mandy's number, and ask her for the password. So even if they've spoofed her phone number and they've taken over simulating her voice with AI is never going to know what that password is that we agreed to.
Absolutely. Not only doing that in your firm, but it's also good to do that in your personal life, because like you were just saying, with AI and voice simulation, somebody could call my daughter and say, that it's me and I need you to give me $5,000 right away. Having that password in your personal life is also very good too.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And on the topic of AI, right, we know that AI has brought us so much in terms of efficiency. Being able to turn to Chat GPT or Copilot to ask a question and give it a prompt that's really specific and save you 15 to 30 minutes of research time to get to that policy, that law you were trying to remember. Is it related to something with tax or something in accounting? And so we know it's brought us that. It's brought us much better and faster content creation. The time it takes me now to develop a PowerPoint is far less than the time that it used to take me. In fact, I can take a Word document where I've written out everything that I want to cover and have it separated by little headers, and then go to Copilot and have it draft up a PowerPoint, right? And then it's just a matter of adding our themes and updating some imagery and trimming out a few words to make it a little more consumable. I don't know how this one was put together, but I wouldn't doubt at all if some of our marketing crew used some AI assistance on some of this. So it's helping us in a number of ways, but it's also helped the bad guys. So we think about terms that we hadn't heard of 5 years ago, like ransomware as a service. So now you've got bad guys that have access to AI that have these global networks, these pyramid schemes, right, where they write some malicious code and everybody that wants to use it just gives them a percentage of the ransom, right? So we've got this ransomware as a service, malware as a service as a thing. So AI is being used by the bad guys, but in this case, it's also being used by the good guys. So we think about tools like the AI-driven mail filters. So Mandy, you're talking about phishing attempts. And so there are tools we can put in place, right? Technology that can drastically reduce the amount of non-productive email. That's the industry term. But what we're talking about there is people trying to sell you stuff, people trying to pretend that they're someone that they're not. So the malicious mail that might have malicious links in them or might have single pixel trackers in them, so those social engineering emails. So all of that junk, that noise can get filtered out using tools that leverage AI to look at things like user behavior analytics. What I mean by that is there's certain tools that are designed to go through and analyze the last 12 months of your email history. And from that, it can build these trusted networks. So it's going to know immediately that Mandy and I collaborate a ton. So Mandy is probably going to send me all kinds of emails on a whole range of topics. But it's also going to look at our help desk technician's mail and say, whoa, this guy doesn't get invoices. So it's kind of weird that this company that is, posing as someone that has emailed this person before would be sending this person an invoice when the tool knows that that's not a person that generally gets invoices. So it can use this user behavior analytics to make really high confidence decisions about what kind of mail should be quarantined as malicious and what kind of mail should just go to the junk folder. So we're seeing some incredible results internally. We changed our mail filtering tool within the last 12 months, and it's just been tremendous. Mandy, have you had reduced email? How's your
Oh my
experience been
God,
with that?
it's amazing. So I talk about this in my calls all the time with potential clients. This tool has reduced my email by 50 to sometimes not more emails per day. It quarantines all of that. And then at the end of the day, it's like 3 o'clock every day Central Time. I
Hmm.
get an email with everything that is quarantined so that I can look through and see if there's actually anything in there that, I did need. But the cool thing about it is if there is something in there that I thought that I did need, I can request to release it, but then it's going to make our security team check it one more time before they release it to me. And another cool feature that I just found out about yesterday with this tool is Sam and I were at a tax convention last week, Thomson Reuters Synergy. And yesterday they sent me the survey and it came through as a link. And I went to fill out the survey. But when I clicked on the link to fill out the survey, Avanan opened up and it says, hold on, we're checking this link for any suspicious behavior before you're allowed to go through and fill out the survey. So it's actually, if you do click on a link in your email, it's going to check it before it allows you to do that. That was the first time I've had that one happen to me. And I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of neat features with that one. We could talk about that one for the whole hour, but some other ways that AI is being used by the good guys. We talk about threat hunting. So we're talking about an agent that runs on your laptop or on your desktop, and it's actively looking at the behavior of the processes that are running. So what that means is if Mandy didn't have a tool in place that was checking for malicious links and she accidentally clicked on something, which is where about 91% of data breaches start. She clicked on that link and the bad actor was able to kick off a process. Maybe it was a fileless attack, so she doesn't even know it's happening. It's just running in the background. As long as she's got, a good enterprise grade threat hunting agent running, that agent is going to be looking at the behavior of the process that was kicked off. And it has a threat library where it's collected information from billions of endpoints, and that threat library stays constantly up to date. So she doesn't have to go through and update that antivirus on her computer like we had to do 15 or 20 years ago with McAfee back in the day. It stays constantly up to date and is looking for the pattern of behavior that it knows is consistent with something malicious. And in over 90, I think 97, 98% of the known attacks, it is able to stop the event, quarantine it, remediate it, and Mandy never knows it even happened. Maybe the security team is going to get a ticket that says, hey, this thing happened and it was remediated and there's nothing else that needs to be done. Or maybe there's an extra step. Maybe there was a file that was downloaded that needs to be deleted off her machine. So AI and threat hunting is another fantastic way that things have evolved on the cybersecurity front. And then even more advanced, there are some things like those SIMs. So people that have physical offices and physical firewalls will often want to add an additional layer of protection. So a SIM, that security incident and event monitoring, is going to correlate all the events that are happening. So it's going to correlate the behavior it sees on the endpoint with information it sees on the firewall, with information it sees on a server. And it's going to be able to make decisions about whether or not the events that are completely separate and might seem totally innocuous on their own are actually related to something that is malicious, and be able to open a ticket with the security desk. So there's a ton that can be done with AI-driven tools. I think we just talked about probably the three most common that we're seeing today, though.
All right. So I know we covered a lot of information, and as promised, here is the WISP template download. If you guys want to do the QR code, it's going to give you the template if you're interested in trying to take, run it, filling that out on your own. If you do find that you need a little more extra help, we are running with the holiday season, we are running a Black Friday special. So we are offering the WISP at half off. It's a one-time fee of $500. If you would like for us to write that WISP for you, we are happy to do that. That is the little QR code there. It's pretty simple to do. You just, we'll get you set up in the system. We'll have you meet with one of our security engineers. He's going to walk through everything that you have in place. And then once he does that with you, he's going to write the WISP for you, and then he sends it to you after complete. Well, actually, he schedules another meeting and walks through it with you and then sends you so that you have that on file. I do know that you are required to have that done before you start filling out tax returns at the beginning of the year and marking that P10 box. So we can definitely help you get taken care of with that. Yeah, and as always, we're actually a little early. Does anybody have any other questions that Sam or I can answer for you?
We've been answering them live,
Right,
so
yeah.
in the off time. So I think maybe we'll let people go get a cup of coffee before their
Yeah,
next meeting, and
give 9
just
minutes back to you
thank you all for joining, and we'll send out those additional materials with our follow-up tomorrow.
tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.